My name is William Kepner, and I'm a survey statistician in the Pacific region in California. In this presentation, I will cover the dairy version of ARMS 3, focusing on why we collect data and the differences between the CRR and dairy versions of ARMS 3. Every 4 to 8 years, cost of production surveys are conducted for selected commodities on a rotating basis. Data is collected on production practices such as the amount and costs of input used. The last dairy cost of production survey was in 2016. Since then, there have been changes in the legislation, technology, and market conditions that affect dairy production. The data collected on the 2021 ARMS will be used to describe the important financial, structural, and environmental aspects of dairy production for not only 2021, but the next several years. One new change to our dairy survey is the inclusion of organic milk. Organic milk production is one of the most rapidly growing segments of organic agriculture. As part of the sampling in 2021 ARMS, organic operations were selected with conventional dairies. Data collected from these organic dairies will be compared to conventional dairies in order to examine the differences in production practices and the costs and returns associated with each production system. The data should provide insight into the profit potential offered by organic systems for U.S. milk producers. Section L on the CRR is Section M on the dairy. Several cost items reported in Section H are allocated to the dairy enterprise. Most cost and production practice information about the dairy enterprise is collected in sections N through V, pages 23 through 31. The first noticeable difference is in Section A, the Conservation Practices Table. Next, Question 17 on the CRR and Question 13 on the dairy are structured differently but ask the same question. Tillage practices, cover crops, and other practices types are grouped differently on this question. When talking to the respondents, pay attention to these differences. Following the Conservation Practices Table, the dairy version has unique questions about growing alfalfa and the method of harvest. If the operator didn't grow alfalfa, remember to ask question 19 about their possible intentions to plant in the next year. Section B, C, and D are the same on both versions. Section E is the same on both versions, except the dairy version does not include the direct sales and incentives from commodity buyers questions found on the CRR. Section F is the same. A farm's operations income also include payments received through government agricultural programs, as well as payments from activities that are part of the farm's business, such as custom work provided by other farmers, sales of forest production, farm machinery, farmland, insurance indemnity payments, cooperative patronage, dividends, or sales of goods processed on the farm from farm commodities. Section G is intended to track these other farm-related income sources earned by the operation. Historic conservation payments questions are also asked on both versions, but in different places. Dairy historical conservation payments questions are found on Section G, page 8, questions 3 and 4. These two questions are in Section A, page 3, on the CRR. Other farm-related income questions on dairy in the CRR version are different. Question 6 on the dairy and question 4 on the CRR are the same. When you see questions on the form asking about costs associated with the dairy operation, what is included and what is excluded? For the dairy enterprise, This includes costs, labor, machinery, and all other inputs used by dairy cattle on the operation. Milking and dry cow, replacement heifers, breeding bulls, calves, etc. This excludes costs, labor, machinery, and other inputs used to produce feed for the dairy cattle. It also excludes costs used for raising on other operations. For example, labor and input costs for milking, herd management, feed, manure, hauling, and manure handling should be included. But any cost with producing feed, such as labor associated with growing corn silage, hay, and other forage and grains for the dairy should be excluded. There are 21 additional questions in Section H on the dairy enterprise. Each of the dairy enterprise questions is a subset of the question above it. One example is question 14. There is an additional question, 14a, on dairy. Section I and J are the same on both versions. On Section K, after question 11 on DRR, dairy, are different. There are several dairy labor questions in Section K. Questions 12 through 15 are additional questions on dairy only. Farm management practices questions 16 through 20 that are on the CRR on page 20 are not included on the dairy version. Dairy section L is section M on the CRR, and section M on dairy is L on the CRR. Dairy has additional sections in N through V. On section N, question 1 through 4 determines if the operation has a dairy operation that should be included in the survey. The information in this section is needed to determine how the dairy operation changed during 2021. For question 5, some dairy operations may have high milk returns relative to inputs used because they were selling down the dairy cattle inventory. Other operations may have low milk returns relative to inputs used because they were expanding the operation. In order to compare the costs and returns of all dairy operations, we need to be able to adjust for inventory changes, especially during the years of extreme price conditions when major inventory adjustments are common. The purpose of Section O is to collect information on purchased cows, heifers, and bulls kept for breeding. Question 1 asks about purchased dairy livestock by type and cost. Question 2 asks questions how they will replace breeding stock, whether by purchasing cows, bulls, and replacements, or by keeping heifers as replacements for breeding. Section P has two purposes. The first purpose is to collect information on the marketing pattern of the dairy herd, how they manage their herd by selling breeding stock, calves, and cull animals. The second purpose is to collect data on other income attributed to the dairy operation. Section Q is for collecting data on dairy housing, as it is a major capital expenditure. Information about housing facilities will be used to estimate the capital usage and costs on dairy operations, and to provide insight into the efficiency of various types of operations. These estimates are used in the cost of production accounts in order to assign annual costs for capital recovery. Farmers do not pay this amount each year, but when they purchase housing facilities, they amortize or gradually write off the cost over the life of the facilities. USDA estimates a capital cost based on the estimated replacement cost of all the capital assets used in the dairy operation. For question 1, use the codes at the top to fill out the answers. Next, we will do a practice question for section Q. The operator informed us that their dairy that started new in 2010 uses a dry lot corral sunshade system. They use 10 roughly equal sized facilities that are steel frame sunshades sitting on concrete slabs that shade up to 1,250 cows, but otherwise the corral is dirt. They also inform us that manure is scraped periodically with a tractor and loader and piled in dry sacks. Their dry lot corrals, manure storage area, and building sites cover about 10 acres. In 2021, they housed calves in 12 super hutches. The operation uses AI, has a computerized feeding system, and keeps individual cow records. The operation has milking units with automatic takeoffs and uses a holding pen with under washers. The operation also uses a nutritionist to design the mixes. With the given information, we will fill out the form as follows. Type of facility will be dry lot corral sunshade. Therefore, we will fill out the row with the given information. Column 1, how many of the facilities were used will be 10. For column 2, what was the floor type of the largest facility? Question, we will look at the codes above for steel, and we can see that it is on the code table as code 3. Therefore, we will record 3 on column 2. Column 3 floor type will be concrete code 1, and column 4 will be code 4 other, because they handle manure by scraping it periodically with a tractor and loader. Column 5 will be code 4 dry sack, and column 6, how many total head of these facilities house at one time, will be 1,250. Question 2 will be 2010 because their dairy started new in 2010. Question 3 will be 12 super hutches, so we will record 12. All of the sub-questions under question 4 will be marked with yes with the given information. And at the end of the question 5, there will be 10 acres, so we will record 10. Milking facilities on many dairy operations are a major capital expense, and this data will be used to estimate the cost of the capital used in milking facilities on dairy operations. Question 1 asks if there are any cows milked in the barn facilities in 2021. Question 1A asks about milking methods used. Question 1B asks the number of stalls in the barn facilities. Question 2 asks if there were any cows milked in a milk parlor during 2021. A milk parlor is an isolated room or separated building to which cows are kept on a loose housing system and are taken for milking. Question 2A through 2H are questions about milking parlor descriptions. Question 5 asks about BST application on cow herds. Bovine somatotropin, BST, also known as bovine growth hormone, is an animal drug approved by the FDA to increase milk production in dairy cows. Question 6 asks about milked cows' breeding types. An operation reports that they milk all their Holstein cattle 3 times daily on a 50-cow rotary carousel in a steel-framed building newly built in 2010. They further inform us that their manure handling system is by flushing manure through a gutter into a holding pit. They also confirm that they do not milk any cows in the BAM facility. Each cow on the carousel has a milking unit attached robotically. They collect computer data at each milking, and BST is routinely administered to the dairy cows. With this given information, we will fill out section R as follows. Because they do not milk any cows in BAM facilities, question 1 will be marked no, and we will go to question 2. Cows were milked in a parlor, so we will mark question 2 yes, and we will continue to answer question 2's sub-questions. Question 2A, one milking parlor was used, so we will record 1. For 2B, parlor type will be carousel. Therefore, we will look at the code box next to 2B and record 5 for carousel, code 5. Question 2C will be code 3, steel, so we will record 3. Question 2D will be flush gutter, code 1. Question 2E will be pit, code 1. Question 2F will be 50 stalls. Question 2G will be 50 units, and 2GI will be 50 robotic. Newest milking parlor was built in 2010, so we will record 2010. The herd is milked 3 times a day, therefore question 3 is yes. They gather milking computerized data and BST is administered. So question 4 and question 5 will both be yes. Finally, for question 6, milk cow breed is 100% Holstein. Therefore, we will record 100 next to A. Section S, dairy feed and pasture. Feed comprises the largest portion of total input costs for dairy production, and therefore it is essential we collect complete information about the operation's feed, usage, and expenses. Use the codes at the top of page 27 to fill out the tables for questions 1 and 2. For question 7A, try to get the respondent's best estimate if the respondent is unsure about the exact amount. The primary purpose of section T is to get information on the methods used to store, handle, and dispose of dairy manure. Question 2, if the operation has manure storage facilities, use the codes above question 2 to fill out the question 2 table. Section U, vehicles, trucks, and tractors. The purpose of this section is to collect data on vehicles and tractors used for the dairy operation during the 2021 year. By itemizing the vehicles and tractors, we can estimate the amount of capital investment in these items. Include all trucks, tractors, and other motor vehicles owned, rented, leased, or borrowed and used for activities associated with the dairy enterprise, such as manure handling and spreading, and hauling dairy cattle, and feed handling, but not feed production. ATV and four-wheelers should be recorded in section V. Section V is the machinery and equipment section. The table in section V lists all the machinery equipment used on the dairy operation in 2021. Do not list machinery and equipment unless they were used on or at the dairy enterprise. There is instructions on the top of the page on how to fill out the table. If the operation used more equipment than will fit in the space provided, please list the most important, most often used, and most expensive equipment on the dairy operation first. Section W, the conclusion section on the dairy, is the same as the conclusion section N on the CRR. If you have any questions, be sure to consult your interviewer's manual, your supervisor, your NASDA coordinator, or the statistician in charge of the ARMS 3 survey in your region. Thank you.